When I hear the term "okay boomer," I sort of feel like there's someone with their hand out, maybe a millennial or a Gen Z person saying, "I've heard enough, boomer." Often, "okay boomer" means someone older is saying, "Hey guys, you youngsters, here's how the world works." And if I was a young person, I'd say, "Dude, that is how the world worked." We live in an era where people are living longer, power is moving younger, and the world is changing faster. So if you are not in a place where you're ready to bring on new mindsets, then you're in the process of dying. My name is Chip Conley. I founded a company called Joie de Vivre, which is now a Hyatt brand. Soon after that, I helped Airbnb to become the most valuable hospitality company in the world. I'm a best-selling author. My most recent book was Wisdom at Work, The Making of a Modern Elder. And I'm a big believer in the idea that we can learn our whole lives. Curiosity is a way of being and thinking that gets sort of beaten out of us. But curiosity is one of the most significant variables associated with living a longer, happier life. Because curiosity is really the taproot for learning. If you're curious, you're going to learn. So when I started my boutique hotel company, Joie de Vivre, I was 26 years old, and I was curious, why are all hotels so boring? Everything was predictable. The nicest hotels were really conservative and expensive, and the inexpensive hotels were the kind of place that you didn't feel comfortable getting under the sheets. And so my curiosity has helped me in rethinking some of the conventions of the business world. And I studied people like Herb Kelleher at Southwest Airlines, but especially Richard Branson, the ultimate rebel business leader. So I felt like I had the fuel of purpose and meaning behind me, even when people were telling me I was crazy. My first hotel was a hotel called the Caravan Lodge. It was sort of infamous as a pay-by-the-hour motel. In other words, a no-tell motel. It was in a bad neighborhood. It was sort of a cool, funky motel from like the 1950s. The bottom line was, this had failure written all over it. I had to rename it the Phoenix. And I decided our primary customer was going to be rock and roll bands, or musicians, or creative types. We said we were a crossroads for the creative. It succeeded partly because it was very unconventional. I came to realize that my passion and my curiosity were really my competitive advantage. It was 1987 that I bought my first hotel, and it was 3.5 years later that I got my second and my third, and then it was another 3.5 years until I got my fourth. And from there, we grew really quickly. 2, 3, or 4 new hotels a year, until we got 21 hotels. So it's 2001, and Joie de Vivre is now the largest hotel company in the San Francisco Bay Area. We were on top of the world because the prior 5 or 6 years had been the dot-com boom. And then came the bust.
Markets become increasingly nervous.
There's a fear of crash.
These losses will affect us all.
And 9/11. And a recession. And SARS. And basically, San Francisco Bay Area became the worst hotel market in the United States. And I had all of my hotels in that basket. That was a hard time. I was desperate in need of wisdom. I went to a local bookstore, to the self-help psychology section of the bookstore, and that's where I got reacquainted with Abraham Maslow's work. He was the one psychologist that I learned in college that I felt like had something to teach me. And he talked about self-actualization, or being all you can be. Relevant to being the CEO of a hospitality company, have helped me to think out of the box. What I learned was what people need more than anything during the most difficult times is to actually think creatively. To be able to take a deep breath and feel like we're going to get through this. The most important thing to remember as you get older is you need to be willing to evolve. And to evolve means you're willing to change. You're willing to be in transition. You're willing to have an openness to shifting your identity and maybe even what you're learning. Some of the qualities that made us successful in our 20s will not necessarily make us successful in our 40s. So part of our process is to evolve and molt those identities or ways of being that aren't working for us anymore. The reason I started Joie de Vivre was I love the creativity and the freedom. But by the time we were to 52 hotels, I realized I didn't have a lot of creativity or freedom in my life anymore. So when I got my first call from Brian Chesky in early 2013, Brian told me about Airbnb, and I told him that seemed like a really stupid idea. I didn't think it was going to be very successful. And then he told me, well, it is successful. It's growing globally, and I want you, Chip, to help us democratize hospitality. He said he wanted to learn from me. What I learned over the course of time was I was going to learn from him as well. In joining Airbnb, I was prepared in certain ways. Number one is I understood the hospitality and travel business, and no one in the company did. They were disrupting an industry they didn't understand. But I was completely ill-prepared in all kinds of other ways. I was joining a tech company at age 52, and I'd never been in a tech company before, and I didn't understand the lingo. I was a boomer joining millennials. More than anything, I had to get used to the idea I wasn't the CEO, but instead, I was the guy serving and doing my best to help the three founders of Airbnb become great leaders. I soon came to be known as the modern elder at Airbnb. A modern elder is someone who's as curious as they are wise, and they're smart enough to know what the situation needs. A little more curiosity or a little more wisdom. Many people who are older think that what young people want is they want that wisdom that you have as an older person. But actually, that's what happens last. The most important thing is having them see you on your learning, curious journey. Through humility and through vulnerability, showing that you are on a journey of learning your whole life. Such that as a modern elder, you are this perfect alchemy of curiosity and wisdom.
I think it's this broad philosophical book that MBA students would be well advised to take on and read in business school and say, if I step back from that, could I get a better perspective on how to use this? The great military strategists, the Sun Tzu's and the von Clausewitz's, had a way of conceptualizing the competition between forces. They saw the best result of military strategy is not having a war. Strategy in business is a relatively new enterprise. It really only came into existence in the late 50s, early 60s. And it was an offshoot of military strategy. People think business and war is all about the numbers and analyzing everything and quantifying everything. And it's not. In military strategy, there are really two actors that attention was paid to. One is ourselves. How strong is our army? What resources do we have to fight? And then competition, our enemy. How strong are they? What resources do they have? And so we'll decide strategy on the basis of the company, or in that case, the country, but in business, the company and the competitor. Sun Tzu, a Chinese general/philosopher who wrote one of the most influential books on war called The Art of War. He wanted to get in behind the mechanics of war to talk more about the philosophy. And I think that's why it's had the staying power it has, because nothing about the world really has changed from that deeper philosophical sense, even though the world has evolved, the equipment used in war, but the philosophy, I think, behind it has remained constant for the many centuries. One thing Sun Tzu said was the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Having the unnecessary carnage in war, the actual killing of people, or in business, the unnecessary destruction of kind of monetary assets and people's lives and careers. That's not the object of war. The object of war should be to try and make sure that you have an outcome that is sustainable. If the object of war is to crush somebody else in a way that makes them hate you forever, guess what they'll do? They will hate you forever. So you express your business strategy in a way that causes potential competitors to say, I'm going to compete elsewhere. And hopefully they'll succeed elsewhere. Right? That's the perfect strategy so that you won't get into wars. They won't attack you. There's no instance of a nation benefiting from prolonged warfare. On what playing field, or if you like military strategy, battlefield are you going to play and where not? And then on that playing field, how are you going to be the best? How are you going to win? You only want to engage in competitions where you can create a win without creating a loser who will keep on attacking you. Ask yourself, what can I uniquely do for a particular set of customers? Would-be competitors will choose to do something else because I do that thing better. That is not a prolonged war. If you do it right, it's a prolonged peace. When you surround an army, leave an outlet free. Do not press a desperate foe too hard. You either have to absolutely eliminate entirely a competitor or give it a chance to find another place to play. You can create for them an escape route to a different part of the market, a different segment, but you've shown them that in your target customer set, you are the best, and they can't just come into that place and do whatever they want. Treat your men as you would your own beloved sons, and they will follow you into the deepest valley. A challenge in the modern corporation, right, is many of them get very big, and you can think of your employees as pawns in a bigger game, and if you lose a few, so be it. A challenge for anybody who's a military commander or a business leader is that they pay very little attention to what you say. They pay attention like a hawk to what you do. So if you say, oh, we're a family, you're like my son, and oh, we have too many of you and we're going to lay off a couple thousand of you. Say, oh, so that's what you do with family members? You fire them? That's why the disengagement scores in business these days are dreadful. They're terrible. And I believe it's because senior managers are not listening to Sun Tzu and saying, each of my employees I need to treat as if they were members of your family. And they will be creative for you. They will treat the customer exactly the way you wish they treated them. They'll develop the people underneath them. They'll do all of these things that are done for love, not because somebody commanded them to do it. In due course, what was recognized in the world of business strategy is that there's a third super important actor, and that is the customer. And so you had to have a tripartite view, which is there's things that are important about the company, there's things that are important about our competitors, and there's things that are important about customers. And that was a problem with early business strategy. It didn't pay much attention to the customer. But over the last 40 years, getting more and more intimate and knowledgeable about customers and really finding ways to serve them better has become a more integral part of strategy. And that's one of the reasons why in the world of business now, design has become very important. Because design is a field that focuses very much on the customer. And that's why I've spent some of my time in forging a bond between the world of strategy and the world of design. Because the world of design has the best training in understanding customers and creating offers for them. It's really weak in understanding the company and competition. It doesn't pay attention to that. That's more the world of business strategy historically. And so if you meld those two together, business strategy and design, you get absolutely the most powerful way of creating fantastic winning solutions for customers.